To summarize where we've been so far in this module, when we talk about branding, our emphasis is not so much on the manufactured quality or the tangible value of the good or service. So how good it is in terms of its physical makeup, if you like. Rather, what we're concerned with in relation to branding is on the quality of the emotion that is attached to the product. So connotatively, we're interested in exploring the brand's intangible value. And that's what I'd like us to develop in this part of the module. Let's start by doing that through looking at the notion of brand partnerships. So how the connotations of two quite separate brands might become attached intertextually or framed in a way so that the connotations associated with both brands sort of become attached to one another. And I want to do that by looking at what I think is quite an unusual brand partnership. So the partnership between ASUS computers and Lamborghini cars. So ASUS computers are pretty common. You might have one yourselves. You might be, watching this and listening to this module on an ASUS computer. So they're a well-made, robust computer. They're not particularly expensive, which makes them popular with a broad audience. So why does this computer brand get attached to Lamborghini automobiles? So how does this brand partnership come about? Now, realistically, there's probably nothing in terms of brand enhancement for Lamborghini here. They're just financially cashing in on the association, on the partnership. But in terms of ASUS computers, we can begin to see in this advertising copy, in this marketing copy, detailing the brand partnership, where the intangible value starts to appear. So if we have a look at the words in this copy, we can see that it's described that the brand partnership, the computers, the Lamborghini notebook series is the ultimate representation of technology and automobile fusion. Now, although there is a lot of computer technology in modern cars, the idea that, all the manufacturing associated with automobiles getting connected with computers at a denotative level, at kind of a practical level, really actually makes no sense. But what the copy is working with here are the connotative values associated with Lamborghini and how that gets attached to ASUS computers. So what we're interested in here is the prestige of the Lamborghini name, which gives these notebook computers the ultimate representation of technology and fusion. So they have the same design details and the same special mirror paint finishing that Lamborghini cars have. So the ad copy here kind of gives itself away when it talks about ASUS and Lamborghini combining the spirit of both products into one piece of technology. So this partnership is not about the mechanics of either the car or the computer. Rather, it's about the value of attaching the Lamborghini name to a good, robust, really functional, but quite affordable computer product. And if you do the reading from Naomi Klein, her classic book No Logo, which is a critical investigation of contemporary branding. She really demonstrates the importance of intangible value in developing brands when she poses these two questions. So why would Philip Morris purchase Kraft for $12.6 billion, which was 6 times what that company was worth on paper? So it's got nothing to do with the quality or the cost of Kraft products. Rather, it's about the values of the Kraft brand. So the values of comfort food, good old-fashioned family cooking, amongst a range of other associations that Philip Morris really bought there. And then Naomi Klein asked the question, what does Tommy Hilfiger manufacture? And her answer is nothing at all. And on one hand, that's clearly wrong. They manufacture, or it manufactures clothes. At least they become Tommy Hilfiger clothes when the brand is placed on them. Until then, they're really nothing more than, quite well made underpants, t-shirts, dresses, shirts, whatever. It's not until the brand, the logo, is placed on the clothes that they become distinguishable from any other piece of clothing. A brand cannot be forced or asserted on consumers. So the relationship between a brand and consumers is one of negotiation. Now, you can do research into the types of values that people want to see in a brand or people attached to a brand. You can do all sorts of design and manufacturing practices to connect your product to a particular set of brand values. But at the end of the day, how that brand is taken up in the marketplace is, in many respects, kind of out of your hands as a communications professional, or as someone who works for a particular company that makes a particular product or offers a particular service. So effective branding involves encouraging consumers to accept the connotations of the brand. So it's about encouraging consumers to accept the values that this brand is offering. Now, once that relationship is established, it's a really quite powerful one. It can be quite robust and withstand some damage. Not too much damage. There are limits to the types of damage that can be done to a brand, but certainly if we look at some very well-known controversies associated with 3 big brands, so the exposure in the late 80s and into the 90s of Nike's use of child labor to make its shoes and its clothes. So Nike was really produced in sweatshops in developing nations, quite often using child labor, and that was a very big controversy for Nike. Similarly, Apple, a few years ago, it was revealed that its products were made in very, very oppressive factories in China with considerably high suicide rates amongst its workers. Its workers were forced to undertake very long shifts. They had to live on site on the factory in kind of a big campus. They were separated from their family. They got very little sleep. The living conditions were very bad. But again, Apple has not necessarily been negatively impacted by that. And in the 80s, Coke decided to change its formula, so to change its taste. And all the research that it did suggested that in taste tests, this new version of Coke was perceived as better than the original Coke flavour and also Pepsi. However, once it hit the market, once it was branded in a particular way as New Coke, it failed spectacularly. It failed spectacularly, and Coke had to withdraw it and go back to the original recipe. So brands can withstand some damage because a brand's image is never stable. Like all meaning, a brand's image is never fixed. So good brands can lose face quite quickly. McDonald's took hits through the 90s and the 2000s from the McLibel case, and also Super Size Me, the Super Size Me film, which really practically demonstrated how unhealthy McDonald's food was. Ribena took a hit when it was revealed that there was just as much sugar in a bottle of Ribena as there was in most junk food. So that was a particular problem because Ribena was marketed up until that point as a healthy drink, one that was indeed suitable for children. And that revelation that it was loaded with really, really excessive amounts of sugar meant the brand took a hit. And of course, Tiger Woods, as a brand ambassador for Nike, their reputation took a hit once again when his extramarital affairs were revealed. So, and Nike eventually had to drop him as a brand ambassador. So good brands can lose face quite quickly, but the stronger the brand, or in other words, the extent to which consumers accept the connotations of the brand, the more likely that in a crisis they are to defend and advocate for the brand. So really strong brands like McDonald's, like Apple, like Nike, when they take a reputational hit, because they have such a strong brand community associated with them, because the connotations of the brand in the eyes of consumers are so strong, what in fact happens in some cases is that those consumers work to defend and advocate for the brand. Because consumers have so much invested emotionally in the brand, they become defenders of the brand and say, well, you know, Tiger Woods might be running around having multiple affairs, but that doesn't mean Nike is necessarily a terrible brand, a bad brand. So through this relationship, consumers actually become kind of unpaid advertisers for the brand. And bad brands can also improve their image quickly too. And by bad here, I mean brands that have over time developed negative connotations in the eyes of consumers. So BP, British Petroleum, an oil company, took very significant reputational hits following the oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, a really significant environmental disaster. And part of the way it responded to that and rebounded from that was through a rebranding campaign to the logo that you see on the right there, which which very clearly looks like a flower. It's designed to shift connotations away from BP, British Petroleum, being a kind of prestige brand, to one which is concerned with the environment, one which is interested in growth. So the image of the flower is one. There's kind of movement implied in the flower as the petals get smaller towards the center. And of course, the colors of green, yellow, and white are all kind of natural colors, happy colors. So interestingly, the connotations of the colors kind of shifted from the old logo, where we were talking about sort of strength, royalty, particularly when associated with the crest logo, to a completely different set of values around nature, around peace and happiness. Similarly, Philip Morris, a cigarette company in the United States, rebranded to become Altria, following all the revelations that and the historically bad reputation that cigarette companies, cigarette advertising had. So again, a shift from a prestige brand, a brand with very, very strong connotations around strength, royalty, to one, again, which is much more focused on nature in many ways. I mean, on one hand, the block of pixels in the Altria logo kind of mean nothing, you know, and that's part of the skill in this in this rebranding campaign. You know, they look like nothing. They're kind of like it kind of looks like a pixelated image where the real meaning, if you like, is blurred out. But because it means nothing, it can mean anything. So hopefully, in the eyes of consumers, Altria loses all the associations, all the negative connotations associated with Philip Morris, and allows, through that quite unfocused, literally, logo, allows consumers to read in or write in any meaning that they want. Branding involves two things. It involves creating shared memories. So through the development of connotations attaching to a brand, at the heart of that lies the idea of creating shared memories amongst brand communities. So people who feel strongly about a brand and will habitually use that brand. So the idea of brand habit being that when I buy running shoes or when I buy sports shoes, I only buy Nike shoes. In order to do that, the brand needs consistency, or, as the readings describe it, interpretive stability. So while there can be a range of meanings associated with a particular brand, those meanings remain relatively stable over time. They remain relatively stable over time. However, brands can only develop through disrupting that stability. And this is where branding becomes an exercise, an activity that is fraught in many respects with a little bit of danger. So brands develop by creating doubt in the mind of the consumer and then demonstrating that the improvement of the brand or the development of the brand reaffirms belief in that brand. Now, we can see that, using the example of New Coke in the 80s, once again, that this failed for Coke. So Coke created doubt in the minds of consumers by saying, we're going to change a traditional, much loved brand. We're going to change the recipe for Coke. We want you to trust us enough that this innovation, that this new recipe is going to be better than before, and you will not only continue to love us as much as you did previously, but love us more. That didn't work. That failed terribly. failed terribly. So the beliefs that people attach to a brand don't just exist in the here and now. They have a past. They're related to our memories. So when we think about Coke, we think about the way Coke tasted in the past and all the times we've drunk Coke and all the positive associations that we have with that. And they also have a future. Those memories have a future. So when we buy a Coke, we're not just buying it to drink in the here and now. We're buying it to continue to reaffirm our belief in Coke as a tasty soft drink. So when that relationship gets disrupted, that's a very, very risky strategy and can go very badly wrong. So, I mean, it's not the case that Coke, went out of business or something like that. And it's not the case that, in changing the recipe for Coke to produce new Coke, that Coke was ever going to go out of business. I mean, it's just one of those brands that, is ubiquitous. But the cost involved in changing the manufacturing and production of Coke, the cost involved in rebranding after a significant investment in establishing a new brand to switch back, all of those costs are really, really unnecessary and very uneconomical for a company. So how do you make all this happen? So how do you create an effective brand, a brand that will produce all of those connotations, all of those positive connotations that you want to associate in relation to consumers? The answer, drawing on the Marcel Danesi reading for this week, semiotizing a product into a brand, is this concept of the brand wheel. And that's what I'd like to focus on next.